Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Empire of the Kop Podcast. With us here today, we have our very own Peter Kenny-Jones, the Liverpool Echo's Kiefer McDonald, and of course, I'll be your host, Farrell Keeling, dissecting that god-awful 4-1 defeat in Naples. I think it's not often that we get to say this, Kiefer, but Napoli absolutely deserved the result they got at the Stadio Armando Diego Maradona, which again, as I say, is a very rare occurrence when you can say Liverpool just provided very, very little in the way of fight much until the second half. And even then, by Liverpool standards, expectations very much fell short.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Napoli's not been a happy hunting ground, has it, under Jurgen Klopp in recent years. I think everyone, kind of knew that it'd be, a difficult game, and given the circumstances that we, have been playing nowhere near our best. If you kind of compare the last two visits there, obviously been, 2018, 19, obviously made a flying start to the league, and then 19, 20, obviously, again, a really strong start to the league, and we still struggled there. So you thought this could, this probably be the hardest of the three away trips, just kind of given everything that, Naples stands for, obviously the ground and the crowd and everything like that. And then obviously you throw kind of Liverpool's form in the early 7 games of the season, whatever it's been so far, it just made for, I'd struggle to think of, worse nights during Klopp's tenure over the last 7 years. It was just, really disappointing. I mean, at half time, I think there was 7 or 8 big chances Napoli had. And I think, we were lucky that it was only 4-0 in the end. It could have easily been 5, 6 or 7. And that could have been in the first half, really. There was just, I think the concerns that everyone had bubbling up to the game, I mean, the derby, obviously, say what you want about that. Goodison's always a hard place to go, and kind of Klopp's record speaks for itself there. But, the Newcastle game felt like, papering over the cracks. So did the Bournemouth game, if you kind of put that into kind of wider context. And then, it just kind of felt like it had been bubbling away, and there has been cracks. And, obviously not out by injuries and kind of the tactical shifts that we've kind of seen this season. Obviously, Darwin Núñez coming back, it's a different way of playing. But yeah, it was just a really, really, an annoying night. And, I think we said it beforehand, didn't we, just before coming on air, that you couldn't really be too angry at it because you could see it coming from a mile off. And, hopefully it's one of those where sometimes sometimes it has to get worse to get better. And we saw Klopp say after the game last night that, Liverpool need to reinvent themselves and kind of whatever that is, whether it's sticking with a 4-3-3 but changing, personnel or whatever, or whether that's going to a 4-2-3-1. Hopefully this is kind of as low as it will get, and it's only 7 games into the season, so the season is salvageable. It's not like when, like the other year when we had the centre back crisis. We're not in January. I know the transfer window's closed, but there is still time to fix it on the training pitch. And yeah, it's just one of those. Obviously, you've got a game on Saturday against Wolves, obviously then the Ajax game, and then Chelsea, and then the international break. So if Liverpool can get a couple of positive results in the next kind of 10 days or so, and then after the international break, you're looking at a few members of the squad coming back, and Jordan Henderson, Canate, and whoever else has kind of been injured. Hopefully Calvin Ramsey is maybe in contention. I think that would certainly help Trent. But yeah, I mean, it has to only get better from this. I don't think it can get much worse.
No, absolutely. You'd hope not. But we'll get onto the injuries that Kiefer's rightly sort of brought up there. But I mean, Pete, we're looking at sort of a performance that was abjectly poor across all departments of the pitch. You can only realistically say Harvey Elliott, Alisson Becker, and Luis Diaz, up until, of course, Thiago Alcantara's entry into the game. They were the standout performers, and realistically, you don't want to be heading into the Champions League and going, we've only going to have 3, maybe 4 players that are going to perform vaguely to the standard we've come to expect, let alone a standard close to that which we were witnessing last term when Liverpool were going for a historic quadruple and fell short ultimately by 2 games, sadly, as it turned out. But I suppose my question to you is how much longer can we sort of expect this to go on after Napoli? Are you expecting that kind of instant reaction, work on the training ground, as Kiefer noted?
Yeah, I think I'm sure most of us have seen what Klopp said afterwards, and as Kiefer touched on, we need to reinvent ourselves, and that's, it's half positive because it shows that Klopp knows there's a problem and there's something to address, but it's worrying to hear that the first week of September of a new season, and we need to reinvent ourselves. The transfer window's shut, so it's all going to be on the training ground. I think a lot of people have pointed towards that. Liverpool do work better when we have 2 games a week. We go straight from Wednesday, Saturday, whatever. Just keep it flowing, and we seem to maybe pick up less injuries because I don't know what they do in training, but we just seem to be dropping like flies at the moment. It's hard to know how long it's going to last. We've still only lost 4 games of it this whole calendar year, so trust me, it could be a lot worse. We're speaking to whatever Tony in this morning. They said they'd happily swap places with us. So, there does need to be a little bit of context on it. Maybe this is the result we needed in terms of the fact that we haven't been doing great, but we've been picking up draws. And obviously the United game wasn't great, but we got a goal back and stuff like that. It's been not great, and maybe we haven't been punished as much. But last night was very bad. I think it's the worst that we've seen under Klopp, and that means that attention turns now. What do we do next? And I can't tell you how long it's going to last, unfortunately. But why not at Anfield? We don't lose there very often. Fingers crossed, touch wood, cross everything, and let's play Wolves, and maybe another 9-0 will help ease everyone's pains a bit.
No, it's the perfect place to show a reaction after that game. But I really want to sort of touch on. And we've already touched on to a certain degree what's sort of going wrong with Liverpool. Kiefer, you rightly mentioned the injuries, and there were some, and there are some significant names that remain out. Prime amongst them was, of course, Thiago Alcantara, and Liverpool did look perhaps not significantly better in Naples, but certainly the midfield looked at least had a bit more sort of control, a bit more sort of impetus, a bit more just generally about it. It's been the one area this season everyone sort of pointed the fingers at and gone, there's just not much sort of grit or determination coming from an area of the park where there should be that as an absolute minimum. So I suppose for you in mind, is the problem sort of mainly the injuries for you in terms of where Liverpool are going wrong this season?
There's so many injuries, it's kind of hard to tell. But I think obviously that's the obvious caveat, isn't it, with Liverpool's performances, and that's kind of not taken away from Napoli's performance last night. But for starters, obviously you've got to look at kind of Trent and how he's played in recent weeks, and you think the relationship he's built with Jordan Henderson on that right hand side in recent years, obviously he has been caught out during the early weeks of the season. Teams have been targeting him, but if someone like Jordan Henderson, who hasn't played on the right this much this season, obviously because Elliott's been playing, and obviously that's due to the balance of the team, that obviously Henderson's has to play that Thiago role on the left, and I think that has left Trent exposed. So obviously that's a prime example there. And obviously there's other factors. I think Trent, I do feel sorry for him. I think he just looks absolutely knackered, and obviously that's not injuries, but it's very close to being one. He's probably suffering from burnout, and obviously with Ramsey not playing, that's what other options does Klopp have really? Obviously Milner played there in the derby, but I don't think anyone would really want to see that or be comfortable with seeing that, to be honest. So how does he solve that one until Ramsey's back, which is you're looking at 3 weeks? I don't know. Does he just keep persisting with Trent, knowing that he's going to get targeted? But hopefully that kind of midfield offers a bit more protection when they're all back. Obviously Klopp said, didn't he, in his post-match interview, his post-game one with BC, that he said until Thiago came, there was no counter-pressing. And I know he only played, less than half an hour, but, the difference in kind of Liverpool's, the difference, obviously they were throwing the towel at it, they were going gung-ho, but just Thiago's ability to win the ball back, with 50 challenges, even 70-30 challenges, and he sets Liverpool on the break. It just feels like there's more control in midfield when he's there, and obviously when he does win the ball back, he's able to set people away. And obviously everyone knows how good he is, and obviously a big caveat of his Liverpool career has been he hasn't been able to stay fit kind of when it matters the most, which is obviously really frustrating. But I think last night was a prime example of just how good he is and how important he is to this side. Again, there's probably an element of Napoli taking their foot off the gas, being 4-1 up with 25 minutes left. But, for Thiago to come on, and, he only trained on Monday. I think people forget that. That was his first day back training. So he's had 2 days training. He's travelled to Naples, and he's putting in that kind of performance, which was, not taking any digs at anyone out in the midfield. I think Harvey Elliott's been absolutely brilliant this year, but I think last night was the first time his age has probably shown, and, he's kind of tactical, that he's maybe not up to that, which is absolutely fine because he's only played, I think I looked at last night, I think he's only started, in midfield 12 times, so there's only a role that he's kind of taken up in the last, 13, 14 months. So for him to maybe have a few flaws in his game, off the ball is nothing to worry about, and nothing that, is going to, you wouldn't imagine it's going to be something that, halts his career or so, it'll kind of steady itself out. At the minute he's I think he started all the games bar Fulham, and even then he came on as a sub, so there's hardly been any time for him to do much learning. So you'd hope once Thiago comes back, you'd hope when Henderson comes back, and there's maybe he can learn off them, and obviously that balance in midfield is probably restored to what it was in a healthy balance. There's just going to be more cohesion within the side. But yeah, I think obviously I don't want to blame it all on injuries, but it's kind of hard to look anywhere else. And I think as well, when you have so many key players missing, and obviously it's still a fantastic Liverpool squad, but it's hard to then look at other areas and identify where the problems is. I mean, if you had a full team of 11 starters and it wasn't performing, you could maybe think, right, well, this isn't working and this isn't working. But it's hard to kind of rip up the blueprint when there's just so many people missing, because it's not a fair reflection of. It's not fair to judge the quadruple chasing side with a half fit side. If you get what I'm trying to get at here. So I think we'll probably learn more in the coming weeks and months whether this is an identity crisis or it's just a kind of a blip and something that's maybe out of Liverpool's control to an extent.
I mean, Kiefer, you rightly touched on the burnout from the prior season. We're talking 63 games spread across the four competitions, and that's without even taking into account international commitments. I think Salah personally went over 70 games due to his commitments with Egypt, and obviously making it all the way through to the African Cup of Nations, where he faced Sadio Mane's Senegal. And that's, again, without then considering the emotional toll of all that. So there's plenty of issues, certainly just beyond injuries, which won't be music to Klopp or the coaching staff's ears. But Pete, do you think this burnout is sort of more of a temporary sort of concern, or do you think it's going to be the kind of hangover that Liverpool have to kind of get over and deal with over the course of the entire season?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the main thing to blame is Pep Lijnders' book, apparently, if you listen to the amount. But I think, it's the burnout, obviously, it does make sense. It's a shorter summer than we've had because of, obviously, the World Cup coming up, and obviously squeezing a lot of games in. We're playing again Champions League next week, and there's not really any time to recover. We've got a game against Wolves in the middle of it. I think we would be okay with our squad. Is all right, but the injuries have just meant that we can't rest anyone. It's just been so stop-start all season. Alisson hasn't even got his back up, and obviously we've got Adrian, but you know what I mean. Kelleher's not there. Ramsey's not there backing up Trent. We've had Matip and Konate injured. In the middle, we know how many injuries we've had there. We've had up to 5 players out at a time, and nearly half of our midfield options gone. Up front, Nunes, Firmino, Jota haven't been fully available. So although our team was good on paper, and it is, we haven't really had anyone who can come in and back someone up all the way, other than Tsimikas at left back. And Klopp has done that. When he said a few years ago he wanted the 5 subs, it always seemed to be that Robertson was the one that he was always saying he wanted to bring off and freshen up. And he did that in the derby, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Calvin Ramsey, Tsimikas double sub happening quite regularly towards the end of the season. And I think it's that inability to be able to mix it up at all has made them all look dead on their feet. I think it's easy to criticise them. I don't think Trent Alexander-Arnold goes and represents Liverpool and doesn't put his heart and soul into it. You say what you like about getting forward, getting back. Maybe he's not the best defensively, but I think they are dead on the feet. Fabinho, I think he's getting unfair criticism. He seems to be doing a one-man midfield job for a lot of the times this season. So they just all need a rest, and we're not going to get one till the World Cup, and then most of them are in the World Cup anyway. So it's a little bit worrying, but it's just these injuries. I think still that's the big crux of this issue. Which, as I said, our players are fine. It's just that we can't rotate them. So hopefully, a couple of weeks that the list gets smaller rather than bigger, and we can really start mixing it up a bit and just get a bit more freshness back into the squad.
Absolutely. We just had a comment here from Mohamed Harith. New formation, no more Milner and Gomez. Keith, I find that the discussion around sort of options like Milner and Henderson, criticism specifically of those pairs, specifically somewhat problematic when we're considering the reality that Klopp's working with the injuries and has had to make these sort of difficult decisions because ultimately, in a perfect world, James Milner, while a perfect standard setter in the squad, shouldn't be starting all the games that he's been starting for Liverpool, especially not a Champions League game. The kind of player that ultimately we all respect sort of comes in the last 10, 15 minutes just to make sure that everyone sort of understands their roles and the importance of the game, and nothing sort of gets thrown away later on. But do you feel that sort of going forward, obviously there's a bit of difficulty with Thiago because we have to respect that he is just coming back from injury. Klopp isn't going to want to overload him sort of going into the rest of the season. You do have an option, a similar but not identical option in Arthur Melo. Is the decision for Klopp now going to be sticking that sort of technical operator in the middle of the park, even if it is Arthur, just to spare Thiago's legs sort of throughout the season until he's back up to a point where we can trust him on a regular basis as far as his general fitness is concerned? Or do you reckon sort of Klopp's going to more keep sticking with the likes of Milner for a while longer?
I think you're spot on there. I think that the Milner criticism is wild. I mean, when you got a new deal in the summer, I don't think anyone begrudged that. I mean, I think I think everyone knew, that the deal was not with playing in mind, if that makes sense. It was, as you say, with the standard setter, and obviously to maybe do a job here and there. Looking at the early rounds of the League Cup and the FA Cup, when you've probably got a few of the academy lads involved, and kind of gives you that experience, which we've seen, and you only have to listen to kind of anyone who's been in and around the Liverpool squad over the past 4 or 5 years. It just speaks so highly of James Milner and kind of what he brings, and kind of maybe that people don't see that. And yet I think now obviously he signed the contract, and at best he's probably Liverpool's 7th choice midfielder. I mean, you look at the minute, Kate is out, Henderson's out, Curtis Jones is out, obviously Arthur Melo's getting up to speed, Thiago's just come back, Oxlade-Chamberlain as well. So he's probably 6th or 7th choice, and obviously given kind of the extent of the kind of early season injuries, he has been forced, as you say, to play more games than he should have, which is not his fault. And obviously, I think last night again was another one where his age probably showed. And the first time, I kind of said it a couple of times this season, is where his age, he's 36 years old, and that has shown. And that's not a criticism of him. The fact that he's still in a Liverpool squad, a quadruple chasing Liverpool squad only months ago at his age is absolutely, a testament to him as a professional. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Klopp kind of does going forward. As you say, Arthur Melo's kind of coming in now, and obviously got his first kind of minutes under his belt last night. Obviously, Thiago's coming back. I mean, as I said earlier, obviously Klopp talks about reinventing himself. If they do kind of go to a 4-2-3-1, which obviously they did do in the second half of the derby when Firmino came on, I think they if you look at kind of how Everton set up, which was what with back three and wing backs, and it was hard to kind of break them down as soon as kind of Firmino came on, sat in the hole, and you kind of had the front four what it was. I think Liverpool looks loads better. They look miles better. There was fluidity there. I think on another day, if it isn't for Pickford and his heroics, Liverpool can easily, I know they can lose it, but they can easily probably win that 2 or 3-0 given the chances that they did have. So it could be interesting to see, obviously, now if he does go to that 4-2-3-1, and then obviously just has a 2 in midfield, and if that's obviously Fabinho, and you'd imagine in an ideal scenario it's going to be Thiago, kind of in what he gives you going a bit further up in terms of counter pressing, and obviously then he can just kind of set that front four away and kind of let them do their stuff. But I mean, obviously we haven't really seen, I can't remember last time I saw Liverpool line up in a 4-2-3-1. I think probably like Palace in lockdown when they won 7-0. That's off the top of my head. So, to kind of do that overnight, they'll have an off day today and they'll be back in training tomorrow. So to do that with 1 day's notice ahead of, the busiest Premier League fixture schedule in history is going to be a huge ask. But obviously we saw on Saturday at Goodison Park that it does have potential, and there are obviously early signs that it does work, and it kind of does offer for Liverpool something different, because obviously since Coutinho left in January 2018, Liverpool played this 4-3-3, which has been absolutely brilliant, and there's been a transition from the likes of Wijnaldum to the midfielders we have now in Harvey Elliott and Thiago. But maybe it is time to try something new, or maybe just kind of play the card, deal with the cards that you've kind of got in your hand at the minute, which obviously Liverpool hardly got any midfielders available. So if you can with Jota coming back and obviously Núñez coming back from suspension as well, if you've got a formation that obviously favours more attacking options, it might seem like a more logical thing to do. But who knows? It's certainly a difficult one. I feel like there is an identity crisis at the minute. So I just think, like, you look at last night and Núñez comes on, and he's whatever he is, 6'5", and he's out on the wing putting crosses into to Diaz and that, and you think, like, it should be do you know what I mean, kind of thing. So I think that obviously all plays into it as well in kind of Klopp's thinking if he goes with a front three or a front four. But you just kind of hope that, it can, like I said earlier, it can only get better. And obviously with the likes of Henderson coming back and kind of adding more stability to the midfield. I mean, even that in a 4-2-3-1, Henderson, Fabinho, obviously that's more than solid enough. And, Thiago and Henderson, that gives Fabinho the kind of rest that obviously Pete was saying that, he desperately needs, because he's just getting pulled from pillar to post. And I think it was the third goal last night, wasn't it, where it was just that simple 1-2, and Fabinho, you just kind of look at him, there's no recovery run. I mean, you can say the same for a few of them, but they're just dead on their feet, and obviously something does need to change.
As we were talking about Fabinho, I'm glad you brought him up, Kiefer, because as we've sort of seen recently, and I think he was at fault to a certain extent for Napoli's second goal in the first half, but in general, I think he's also attracted perhaps a fair bit more of his share of criticism than is warranted. I think particularly, I think it was at the game before. It was the game before Everton. I think there was a situation where Henderson Fabinho sort of caught just a header out the box. Henderson out further. Fabinho watches his man and goes to press, makes the right decision. Henderson has to either fill the space behind him or go to the man. If Fabinho doesn't make that decision to go to his man, does neither, and then Fabinho gets the blame for pressing his man. So I think, apologies, I can't remember the specific game. I can remember the actual game, but I think to a certain degree, a formation change would be risky but warranted at this sort of stage in time. Pete, I don't know how you feel about it specifically, sort of going into Wolves. Obviously we've got some tough games ahead. Ajax, of course, who impressed in the Champions League against Rangers, and of course Chelsea. But they're going through a bit of discord at the moment, change of manager, but looking likely to bring in Graham Potter from Brighton, who's certainly a very qualified and able coach. So is the solution something as drastic as a formation change, you think? Or is it a matter of sort of giving the players a kick on the backside, as Danny Murphy suggested today?
Well, as Kiefer said, it's hard to have the time to say, right, we're playing this system or we're doing this instead. And it is such a short amount of time up until Saturday, and Klopp's obviously going to have some ideas in the back of his head. I'm sure, as much as he has been staying loyal to 4-3-3, I'm sure he has got other things up his sleeve that he's happy to do and happy to try. But it's just because he said that we need to reinvent ourselves, that makes everyone think that he's going to do something drastic. And it's hard to know what that drastic thing will be. We have only got so many players we can use, and we want to make sure we win. But he's going to try and get a reaction out of his players. It feels like the midfield is an area that we're getting overrun in a bit at the moment. And you saw what Carragher said. It will, it's not necessarily the defence's fault what's happening. It's because there's no pressure in the midfield. Now the defense is still stepping up because that's probably what their instructions are to do so. And then that's allowing players to just have a free run at our goal. And it just seems so often that we just have players running at Alisson, and he's got to save our bacon, which thankfully he does do quite a few times, but we shouldn't be putting him in that position. It's hard to know what Klopp can do, what he will do. Obviously he's saying a 4-2-3-1 and the personnel we've got, but I don't know what you would do, more of a 4-4-2 diamond type thing. I mean, we should put extra body in the middle, but when Firmino plays, he basically is part of that midfield three at the moment, and so yeah, thank God I'm not in charge, but I'm sure they'll have something up their sleeve for the weekend. And yeah, it's just, I think we just want to see younger players, new players, give them a bit of a chance. This seems like the perfect time to let Arthur have the chance, or Arthur, sorry. I'm not sure how fit Carvalho is going to be. It's maybe we'd like to see him have a go, Harvey Elliott, and just try and rest a few people and know that we can come and change the game. We all want Thiago back. We all want Nunes scoring. Just try and get something that's going to get the confidence going. But at the moment, you can only really trust Luis Diaz, I think, to pull out a big performance. And yeah, we'll just have to see what happens.
No, absolutely. I mean, going into Wolves there, Kiefer, Pete's made a good point about Carragher's sort of tactical analysis from last night on CBS. We were sort of urging, I suppose, Klopp to compromise some of the sort of recent sort of tactical values, particularly with regard to the high line specifically. Instructed them to, rather than rigidly stick to the offside trap when the midfield is failing to be an effective barrier in front of it, to take a yard or two, back to anticipate any sort of overhead balls runs through. do Liverpool need to really sort of compromise their values in this regard? I think it's looking very hard at the moment to argue against that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, after what was it, 43 seconds last night, and Victor Osimhen was running for own goal. They broke the lines already, and that kind of just set the tone for the evening, didn't it? Kind of thing. And obviously, he didn't score that chance, but they had joy kind of all night running through the lines. And I think it was the third goal that Simeone scored as a still, which I saw like this morning, and it was just like the line, and it's just all over the place. And obviously, that's not a high line; it was on the edge of the box, but it just kind of shows that kind of the dysfunctional unit kind of that they're all operating at the minute. And I think it was quite telling that if you listen to Robertson's post-game interview on BT, and amongst many other things, he said the one kind of thing was that it was about pressing, and it was about backing up mates on. If someone presses, you need to be 5 yards behind him and make sure there isn't that gap, because if they do beat the press, and that's what Napoli had so much joy with last night, didn't they? Putting the ball in the channels and running off Gomez. And I mean, Gomez didn't cover himself in glory for that one, which he should have just passed out of play, but he got tackled into, and Van Dijk obviously makes the clearance and recovery. But I can understand, and I think Carragher said it a couple of times in the past, hasn't he, about the high line, and might have been during January 2021, with the whole defensive crisis. I think Liverpool were going for a similar high line with Kabak and Phillips and Fabinho and Henderson, whoever else was playing at the back. And I do remember Carragher saying something similar, which obviously it makes sense, because obviously at that moment in time, obviously you had Kabak and Phillips, who obviously not got the athleticism of Gomez and Van Dijk or even of Matip. So obviously Liverpool did adapt in kind of the weeks and months after that, and obviously ultimately did get the season back on track. Obviously qualifying for the Champions League, and it might take something at the minute to kind of do something similar. And even if it's just I think if the midfield's more compact, I think that issue isn't there. And obviously it sounds dead obvious, because if you have two men pressing the ball in quick succession, and they an opposition beats one player, then the other player's there. They don't even have that chance to line up the ball over the top or down the line. So I think there's probably a few other stages to kind of look at before you probably change your high line, because I think if you kind of drop that back by 5 yards, and then midfield's got to come back, and kind of the way that the cumulative impact that has on the rest of the team. But like I say, with Thiago coming back, he's probably Liverpool's best counter presser in midfield. I probably wouldn't hesitate on. Sorry, I wouldn't be dropping the line just yet. If Thiago's getting pulled from pillar to post on Saturday and then against Tuesday on Ajax, then maybe I would look at that. But for the minute, I think Liverpool should probably keep it as it is, because obviously they've kind of gone through this worst period now. Obviously players are starting to come back. Obviously sounds like Henderson will be back after the international break. Saturday, obviously I know Wolves aren't exactly, they haven't had a great start to the season, but they don't concede that many goals. And that's kind of been the one thing on the Bruno Lage. They don't score many, they don't concede many, they do draw a lot of games. But, that game on Tuesday against Ajax is absolutely massive now, obviously having been thumped 4-1. So, you really need to kind of hit the ground running on Saturday to kind of, put a bit of confidence back in the team, because it's such a quick turnaround. What is it? Two games in 5 days, whatever it is. And, if you don't win that one against Saturday on Wolves, and then there's kind of a hangover going into Anfield on Tuesday, it's the last thing that anyone needs. And certainly the players, and certainly, the likes of Jota, who are coming back, Thiago, who are coming back, if they've not had a great outing or a great game, so to speak, you do worry what that could do. And then obviously you've got Chelsea, haven't you, at the end before the international break, who've just obviously appointed Graham Potter. Obviously, I think it'll probably be his first Premier League home game. I'm not sure if they've got the Champions League next week, but obviously there'll be a huge reception for him there, kind of thing. They'll have undoubtedly a new manager bounce. So it's going to the 3 tough games. In isolation, if you kind of look at them individually, they're winnable. But as a 3, they all offer different things, don't they? Obviously, like I say, Wolves, are going to be another difficult side to break down, and Liverpool struggled with that this season. Obviously, they've had so much possession, but it's just kind of been in and around the kind of 18-yard box that their failings they've kind of come short. So it is a really difficult period at the minute, and you're just kind of hoping that they can kind of navigate these next 3 games, and especially the 2 league games. I mean, I think Liverpool would have enough in the other 4 Champions League games if they didn't win against Ajax. But you'd think the 2 league games, you at least need 4 points from them, and anything other than that is going to be disastrous, I think.
Whilst I've got you, Kiefer, can I grab a score prediction from you? You're feeling optimistic?
For Wolves on Saturday, I'll go 2-0. I was just thinking, will they score? I mean, it depends, doesn't it, if Costa plays. I mean, he's obviously going to score at Anfield. You might as well just get that out of the way now. But I think 2-0. I think there's a few changes I'd probably put in there as well. Obviously, you'd probably start Thiago, maybe throw Arthur into there. So it's a nice game. It's a game you're going to have a lot of the ball. I think you could do worse things than throw Jota in there, maybe. I think, Salah's kind of looked at a shadow of himself in recent weeks. I think, if you'll get Jota in there, I think that'd be brilliant, because I think people have forgotten how good he was for Liverpool at times last season. Obviously dropped off after January, didn't he? But that first half of the season, he was absolutely brilliant, and that versatility in attack is kind of what Liverpool could do with at the minute. With Salah not performing and firing on all cylinders, but I think Liverpool will have enough to win on Saturday. Obviously, it's a tight turnaround. Obviously, they will be knackered from obviously the travelling and obviously just going up from Naples. But fingers crossed. I'd say I'm confident 2-0.
Massively underappreciated at times, Diogo Jota. That again, equally, if you're saying there's a game that Salah almost has to score in, it would be home to Wolves. He needs the goals. He needs a confidence boost. Liverpool could use the confidence boost. Pete, Kiefer's gone for a 2-0. Are you going to one-up him here?
I just said 9, so I can stay loyal to that. But yeah, I think I don't think we'll give a clean sheet, unfortunately. So I'll say 3-1. But I still think, I want to remain positive. I'm not saying that that scoreline will happen, but I'd like to think we're going to sort this out soon. The team hasn't changed much from, as we said before, there were 2 games from winning a quadruple. And no matter what, they won a double last year. So we've got a very good team. We've only lost 4 games this calendar year, and there's only a few months left of it. Fingers crossed it doesn't add to it and make it number 5. But I just think we should have enough. The crowds, we've been all right at Anfield this season. It's been everywhere else, other than the Palace game. But even then, we were quite unlucky not to come away with a victory. And let's just hope it builds us up. And having 2 of them back to back, and then the Champions League game coming. Yeah, I'd like Nunes, Kop end. I think I think Salah has got enough in his locker. I think he'll benefit Nunes the most and hopefully calm him down a bit. But yeah, I'll say let's go for Nunes hat-trick, 3-1. One game, perfect.
Oh, the king of optimism himself, and Nunes hat-trick. We'd absolutely love to see it at home. I'm going to go smack bang right in the middle of the both of you. I'm going to go for a 2-1. I'm optimistic for the win, but I don't think Liverpool will keep a clean sheet. Hope to be proven wrong. But, again, we'll see. Plenty of factors here at play. We've got key men gradually coming back into the squad. Thiago has been a big miss for Jurgen Klopp, and hopefully he can prove to be just decisive coming back into the squad. Kiefer, before we go, thank you very much for coming on again. And anything you'd like to share with our fans here on the pod? Any exciting projects coming underway at the Liverpool Echo?
We've got some stuff coming out this weekend. The Women's Super League went down to Prenton Park yesterday morning. That was really good. Obviously, big season for Liverpool Women's. Back in the big time for 2 years out. Seems like there's a really positive, attitude and kind of obviously given what happened with the women's, the Lionesses during the summer, it feels like it could be a really big WSL season for every team and obviously kind of across the board. So that's certainly something to look forward to. And I think, like I said, there's a lot of positive. A lot of excitement as well within the squad. Obviously, they play at Anfield next month in the Merseyside derby, so that'll be exciting. And then a few other things in the pipeline. Can't say too much at the minute, but hopefully a few more exclusives to come in the coming weeks. So yes, plenty of stuff to keep me busy.
Lovely stuff. We love to hear it. And of course, you can follow Kiefer at KieferMacD on Twitter and keep track of everything that's happening with Kiefer specifically, and of course, the Liverpool Echo. For now, of course, drastic measures potentially on the way for Liverpool. Formation change, Thiago starting, Arthur starting, who knows? But we know something's going to change. Klopp's going to want a reaction at Anfield and get 3 more points on the board in the Premier League. Hopefully, some cause for optimism there. We've been Peter Kenny-Jones, the Echo's Kiefer MacDonald. I've been your host, Farrell Keeling, and we've been the Empire of the Kop podcast. Take care. See you next week.